Alrighty, I am preparing it to go to YouTube. Just another second. Alrighty, I am preparing it to go to YouTube. Just another second. Alrighty, I am preparing it to go to YouTube. Just another second. All right.
It looks like we have 4 attendees.
Oh, okay.
Just a second. Why is it doing that? All right, Andy, you're the host. You're all good now.
Looks like we have. Okay, Nick, I'll try to handle it from here. Thank you.
Okay.
Andy, you're the host. You're all good now.
All right, Curtis, I think we're ready to begin.
Andy, can you do a roll call?
I can. Mr. Silver,
Here.
Mr. Guy,
Here.
Ms. Burke,
Here.
Ms. Fazora,
Here.
Mr. Evans, Mr. Reed.
Here.
Mr. Evans, I don't know that we got you on the record.
I am present.
Thank you.
Mr. Winterhalter's here.
Mr. Winterhalter, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
And Reed Smith is here as well.
I'm sorry.
Okay. We'll start with a moment of silence before we move on to the rest of the agenda. And have the members had a chance to review the agenda? Any comments, or should we move forward? Any
Move
comments?
forward.
So we have minutes from April 29 to approve. Do we have any comments on those minutes?
Looks good.
I move to approve it.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of approving the April 29 minutes, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Minutes are approved. And then next we have, there's an application for Act 247 review for the Newtown Township Historic Ordinance. And we have that, those that have the PDF, it's right there. It's page 9 on ours. Is Leonard or somebody out there to present?
No, I do not. Let me go back to the panelists. No, I don't have any board member represented here this evening. I think what the board was looking for was just an overall discussion and any comments the Planning Commission may have regarding this new proposed ordinance. This is currently a draft. It's not been reviewed by the township's legal team. However, we did receive comments late this afternoon from Mr. Edelman. He's an attorney representing BPG. I believe Mr. Ford is in attendance. Mr. John Ford is in attendance. I don't know if anyone else has any comments, and I don't know if now is the appropriate time to take those comments, but I don't know if you'd like to just go through the ordinance itself and offer any suggestions that you may have at the moment.
So I will pose, unless someone has an objection, only because it combines everything into one. Attorney Edelman marked up and I believe included the whole document. Does anyone have an objection to reviewing it in the form of his rather than going through the whole document and then proceeding to his. I'm flexible either way. I'm just posing for efficiency if anybody has thoughts.
Kurt, are you saying thoughts on big
Whether we
picture of
should-
the document?
Whether we start with, so whether we just use Greg Edelman's document because it's the whole document, or we review the blank, just the standard clean document, and then we go to his comment.
Well, if this is an open discussion, maybe before Greg's comments were presented this afternoon, however unfortunate that might be that they were late, I generally don't want to ever take away a property owner's rights, whether it be residential or commercial. So that's always something that concerns me. And it seems that on some level, and I haven't been able to sort through it, and I'm not an attorney, as to how that may or may not be impacted, that somebody's rights that they currently have are now going to change. So that's my first thought. And it's also residential. Like there's homeowners, my neighbor has the Evan Lewis house here in Echo Valley, right? Like how does that affect his ability to do stuff with his house? I don't know. I'm not exactly certain. So I'm generally inclined to not want to take away rights. The second thing is, who governs this? Is this the Planning Commission, the Historical Society, Planning Commission? Is it Andy's job to now enforce? My head's spinning a little bit on the whole subject.
This is what Greg also marked. He asked that question, basically.
Right.
Well,
Is it Andy's job?
Well, ultimately, I believe the ordinance itself is being proposed to outline and answer those questions. It's to create an historical commission and an oversight board that any modifications, repairs, alterations, or significant improvements to there's two classifications that the ordinance creates in historical significance. So if you fall in category 1, you have one set of standards. It's obviously a higher level review if by the historical commission, not by me individually. Initially, it may get to me as the code enforcement officer, but not initially. I do see in here they've added me as a member of the team, but that's obviously subject to change. But ultimately, it's there to provide some outline, some guidelines for, to deal with how the township handles historically significant structures.
Who makes a determination what is historic, what is not?
Well, I think that's the other goal, is it does allow a review process for things to be added, properties to be taken away, how alterations, modifications are done. There are a list of conditional uses that are above and beyond the underlying zoning district. It establishes that commission to hold a meeting to review an applicant's proposal to make any such changes. And then, if you go to section.
Well, can you back to the origin of it? So my understanding is they were supposed to have some public workshops, similar to we did with the comprehensive plan. Do you know if they had any public meetings for this?
I'm really not aware of that. What I can tell you here this evening is that I was asked to review an old draft of a very similar ordinance. And actually, Kathy Spar and I were asked to do that when Kathy was still with the township. So this is going back potentially 6 months ago. So what we did is we kind of pared it down and reorganized, really kind of just reorganized some of the thoughts that were in the original document, pared it down by eliminating a lot of duplicity in the old ordinance So that was really what Kathy and I provided. And
So,
then,
Andy, does that mean, are you saying that there was an initial draft that was then reworked? Or
Many
was the
years
initial
ago.
draft are some pre-existing ordinance? And that's kind of one question. And then the other is, was there an outreach to area towns that also have historic
I have a couple
zoning and
of-
management? And do we have a sense for how this?
Hey, Andy, can you promote Len or maybe Humes,
Yeah,
Mr.
I have-
Humes?
Yeah.
Leonard is there waiting.
And can somebody explain what the origin of this was? Where is this
Yeah.
coming from? The comprehensive plan, the strategic plan? Where is this coming from?
And who wrote it?
Oh,
Leonard's
hopefully
out.
someone
Get
can.
away from me.
There's Leonard.
That is all.
Can you see me?
No,
No.
but we can hear you.
You might have to hit your video button manually.
Andy, there's no option to have a video here, so I'm gonna log off and log back on.
Okay.
You didn't promote me. All you did was give me the opportunity to speak. You need to promote me as a panelist.
You there now? There you go.
There you are,
Hey,
Len.
Len.
I will answer some of these questions as quickly as I can because I am eating my dinner with my wife right now. But I think that someone also said that Doug Humes is on here, so that would probably be a good person to add in here as well. So to answer Anita's question, since that was the most recent one, this is a product of the strategic plan. The strategic plan identified the need for the preservation of historic structures in the township. 17 years ago, the Historical Society came to the Board of Supervisors with a proposed historic preservation ordinance. And from what I'm told, and obviously what is evident today, is that historic ordinance was never passed for whatever reason. Fast forward to today, the strategic plan gets completed and it identifies the need for the preservation of historic structures. So the Board of Supervisors, myself and Tina Roberts-Lightcap have been working with Kathy Cavalier from the Historical Society and Mr. Humes in crafting this historic preservation ordinance to achieve that goal of the strategic plan. The Historical Society drafted the original draft. It was then given to Mr. Catania for a legal review. After Mr. Catania reviewed it, we gave it to the Code Enforcement Department, since they are going to be the ones who are responsible for the implementation of the ordinance, if you will. And then it came back to the Historical Society to make sure they had no issues with it. And the Board of Supervisors then voted unanimously to begin this process in hopes of adopting this.
Leonard, what public outreach has there been besides the Historical Society and the supervisors?
The Historical Society sent a letter to every single historic owner in the township 2 months prior to it coming to the Board of Supervisors. Kathy Cavalier also then, for the homes where the addresses were returned back to her as like a return to sender, went and personally dropped off the letters to every mailbox. And it was only maybe like 6 or 7 that did not get delivered and that were returned back to her. We waited about a 2-month gap, I believe, 1.5 to 2 months, for those residents who are a historic home to provide comment to the board, to the Historical Society, and to make any changes that might be needed before it came to the Board of Supervisors. So we had all that work done prior, and then we brought it to the Board of Supervisors, and that's where we are today.
Were there any public meetings, like workshops, like we did on the comp plan?
The public meeting, there will be a public hearing before the Board of Supervisors can adopt this as part of the MPC. Since it is a zoning change, we will have a public meeting where more individuals from the public, so that if they choose, can come and voice their concerns or frustrations with this. But in terms of any other public workshops outside of the public meeting that we had with the Board of Supervisors and the Historical Society reaching out to each and every historic homeowner, I don't have any other information on that.
But was there any context given to, obviously the historical side of the equation was dealt with to some degree. Now, look, we're working through some red line stuff today at the last minute. That's unfortunate. Was there any context given to the other side of the equation? The rights of the homeowner or the commercial property owner?
Yep. This ordinance is not what the one or two opponents of it are trying to make it seem. This is not a historic ordinance that strips property owners of their rights or abilities to control and maintain their property. Quite frankly, it's the complete opposite of that. The goal is to preserve the historic structure, but we are not in any way, shape, or form removing rights of the property owner. It even says in the beginning of the historic ordinance that those common sort of changes to a property, whether that be a window or anything else, is not, and even the internal configurations of your house are not governed by this. But if you want to put an addition onto your house and you have a stone facade, well, yeah, the historical commission will most likely tell you you can't put siding on that. You will have to match it, just as Ellis Preserve did with the expansion they did to the ballroom. That was an expansion onto it that matches the facade and it looks beautiful. And that's what the goal of this is.
Lane, how was it determined what structure is historical, who made that determination, and what are the guidelines?
That'll have to be an answer that Mr. Humes will have to provide.
Okay.
Well, I reached out to the guy in my neighborhood who owns the Evan Lewis house, and he hadn't heard about any of this.
I can't answer that, Paul, except for the fact that, as I said, prior to the Board of Supervisors, I'm sure that everybody gets mail and they don't look through the mail as diligently as they should. But I will say that I have seen the letters that the Historical Society sent out, and based off of those representations from the Historical Society, myself and my colleagues on the board were confident that they achieved that notice sort of hurdle, if you will.
Mr. Chairman, if I may speak on this a little bit.
Yep.
I have some strong concerns with how the ordinance is drafted. If you look at the definition section, it describes a historical resource as essentially whatever the Historical Society decides it wants to be in the very first paragraph. You take the definition of historical resource, you track it down to paragraph 4.1, which says historical resources are as designated on the map. And then further down, it says the inventory has been compiled by the Historic Society. So when you look at the map, there's about 119, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't count them all, but there's a number of flags on the map throughout the township, and they immediately become designated as historical resources and subject to the restrictions in the statute. So just for open disclosure, I live in the Listener development. There's 4 flags in the Listener development. Listener, of course, is private property, subject to various functions, but I looked at the exact flags and one of the buildings is not even there. So, I mean, that was the William Lewis house is no longer on the property. So we are enacting or through ordinance or legislative fiat, we're creating use regulations on a property owner, which frankly, I don't think is appropriate. Frankly, probably is an effective taking without legitimate compensation, which is a condemnation proceeding. Now, there is a mechanism in the statute to compensate a property owner if that occurs, but I have some serious concern. Additionally, if you look at the Episcopal Academy property, I think there's 4 flags on that property. I'm not certain that the municipality has the authority to go upon private property and say, hey, we're going to designate something and say that you can't use it, or we want to control you can't make any substantial changes. I would also call the attention to the entire Planning Commission that of the language, there's a section in the Comprehensive Code that deals with historical buildings. And clearly the Comprehensive Code says, and then Paul Evans, this is for you, right, that a landowner can do whatever he wants to do with his property as long as there are no federal monies given for maintenance of that property. So even a national history designation by the Department of Interior does not actually restrict the use. Now, I think the ordinance as it's drafted really goes a little bit too far probably beyond the MPC's authorization, because when you look at our comprehensive plan, there are express restrictions on how far the historical designations should go. I clearly appreciate the Historical Society and that they want to preserve the properties, but there's a balancing here, and this ordinance, the way it's structured and the way they create this, the number of initial flags of what is a historical resource probably is not appropriate. It probably is either a violation of the property owner's due process, or probably impinges upon some type of constitutional protections of that property owner. I have some serious concerns with the way the ordinance is structured, particularly the start of, okay, this is going to be your 119 historical properties, because I don't think the municipality can do that.
I was concerned about how broad the classification of Class 2 historic resources is. It is written in such a way that it can encompass almost anything, because it talks about anything that significant character or interest as part of development of the heritage of this area, an important event, distinctive architectural style, distinguishing characteristics, noteworthy work of a designer or architect. I mean, this is very broad, and encompasses almost everything you want to put in it.
I'd like to ask a question of Leonard or Douglas. So I'm on my other monitor. I went to the Newtown Square Historical Society. I found this document, but it doesn't have the list of properties. So when this document was provided to the public, did it include the addresses so someone could say, oh, there's my house. They're talking about my house. Because the public document that's on your website doesn't give me, all the houses and addresses and, the date it was built, et cetera. Can someone answer that question?
I'll let Doug answer the website question. But what I will say is what I said in the beginning of this, is that every home that is identified on that map that is considered historic under the Historical Society's, however they came up with it, received the letter. That's what I'm saying. That so they could either go on that website and say, hey, my house is on this flag, or my house is flagged on this map, but they would also have received the letter from the Historical Society. And as I said to you, there was only a handful that were returned back as a return to sender, in which the president of the Historical Society hand delivered them to that property owner. So every property owner that is identified on the map received notice. Now, as for the website question, Doug's gonna have to answer that. And I think, Doug, if you can, shed some light on some of the other concerns or consternations that have kind of been arisen, if you can. You're muted, Doug.
Silva, at the Historic Society's website, on the first page, there's a historic resources inventory, last revised April 12, 1921. If you click through, that gives the entire listing of historic resources, has their address, has the site name, the date it was done, the Delaware County folio number, just all the detail that you're looking for. That's
but just not, no, I understand, but it's not attached to the document that you presented to the public for them to review the document. It's marked draft.
We drove the public to that website, and if they clicked on the same thing that I clicked on, they would have that information. So if you're saying we didn't compile the two PDFs into one, you're right, we didn't. And I think people can overcome that.
Were people aware there was an ordinance being created that was that was the reason you were asking them to look at this?
And they're not the only stakeholders, the owners.
So
Right.
I don't know if I was not clear enough, or there's multiple things going into one. So I apologize for that. The reason for the letter was letting them know that the township was going forward with the historic preservation ordinance, to go to the website to see the actual text of the ordinance, and then the other additional documents that Doug just mentioned there. So those homeowners, that's how they were informed, that they were essentially classified underneath this historic ordinance. This is what the ordinance is. And of that, I think there was only 2 individuals who had, or I guess 3, including Equus, who had issues with it. The overwhelming response were people who were in favor of it. And I believe the Historical Society is planning to present that at the public meeting of the Board of Supervisors.
So how many people respond, like of the 119 or whatever it is, how many people responded and what was the segmentation of support, not support, no answer?
That's a question for you, Doug.
I had the president, when people had specific questions, she sent them to me. I considered their questions and responded to them. There were 2 or 3 people there.
That were opposed to it.
No, they just had questions. How does this, does this do this? Does this, is this going to stop me from painting my house?
So how many, so I'm still a little unclear of the 120 or so properties. How many?
I heard that as 2.
Okay, so before we get into the guessing game, Andy, can you promote Kathy Cavalier, who's the president of the Historical Society, to be able to give the actual information instead of us guessing?
And did I understand you to say that a copy of this draft that we're looking at now was given to the people?
They were provided the website to go to it.
And it was on the website?
It was on the Historical Society website.
The draft that we're looking at?
The draft that you're looking at.
I'll just say this, full disclosure, I'm president of the Listener Homeowner Association, and we have historic properties designated on that map, and I did not get any notice of this. The first time I saw this was when it came out to the Planning Commission.
Yep.
The other aspect of it is if you only got 2 or 3 comments, it may be that the others simply did not respond, did not acknowledge whatever. It doesn't mean that they do not object. So when this issue continues to develop, more people will come up.
Well, I think that that's a hard vacuum to operate under, Mr. Shimon. I mean, if you take that position, then no municipal government could theoretically ever function, because 99% of the issues that we vote on in the affirmative are ones that we don't hear from the public. But Ms. Cavalier is on the phone now, so I think that it's best for her to answer some of these technical questions.
Ms. Cavalier's on mute.
I've asked her on mute.
There she
Here
is.
she goes.
Am I there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Okay. As far as the question on returned responses from residents, in the letter that we initially drafted, I left my email, my home phone number, and I set up 4 meetings at the Square Tavern for public. Basically for the people that receive letters to meet with the board members and discuss any issues that they had.
Kathy, so just a clarification, was the letter sent from the township or was the letter sent from the Historical Society?
From the Historical Society.
Okay, I think that's a concern.
Yeah.
Because I
It's
think
not the township.
the authority is really the township who's doing the ordinance, and that's going to grab people's attention. But Kathy, can you get back to, you said you gave them a way to reach
This
out
is
to you.
Yes.
How many responded from the 119?
But let me just preface that basically the Historical Society sent the initial letter to identify that we were pursuing this historic ordinance and that their home or whatever property they had was designated as a historic resource.
Mm-hmm.
So when the responses started to come in, I had 5 homeowners call me on the phone. Of the 5 that called, those were only positive, wanted to know how to help, how to volunteer. The 4 people who met me at the tavern, and we were there every Saturday and open every Saturday for any responses. Their concerns had to do with code enforcement, not really the historic ordinance, had to do with sewer hookup and other issues that probably we could not address, but I did have a good discussion with these people. But there was no concern about the historic portion of that.
Kathy, sorry, just perfect timing to make a comment about I think what you were just pointing out there, Claire. If I, as an individual resident, not a member of the Planning Commission, say that I want to hold public meetings at the Marple Newtown athletic field and make a suggestion to the residents to show up and discuss how do we get more athletic fields. I don't think that's township
No. You're
disclosure. Oh, let me just finish, Kath. I don't think that's township
misinformed.
disclosure of a public workshop for a meeting. Is
No,
that what
this
you were
was not-
saying? Kathy, hold on a second. Claire, is that what you were saying?
Yes, I would not I would not see that as a public, as the township endeavor. I would see that as an organization seeking to do something.
Which has a good cause. It's a
Yeah,
good
I'm
cause.
not arguing with not doing it. I think it's
Yeah.
appropriate, but
Interrupt you. It was not a public meeting. This was the Historic
Oh.
Society reached out prior to
So there
the,
was no public meeting.
the township voted to make it public. It has been up on their website and stays there for 60 days before the public hearing will take place, which is the
But
end of
in it-
June. But
Kathy, I think that the challenge here is we're saying it's available to the public, but with all things that we do that affect a landowner, a property owner, they get direct notice from the township. And so to say it's on the website, but we haven't told anybody it's on the website, the township, not you, you've done a good job trying to reach out to constituents that would be impacted. But I'm just curious as why the township hasn't given notice to the property owners. And for that matter, if this has been out there for a month, why did we only get this on Monday?
that's for someone else to answer.
Yeah, that question, Claire, would have to be answered on the administrative side. Whenever you normally get your packet, if that's the time frame that you normally get your packet. If not, then we need to have a conversation administratively on why the information only got to you today, and an opponent decided to give it to you 4 hours ahead of time to derail this or cause confusion. The other thing too is I don't know if it's necessarily on the township. I don't know if the township would be, and I don't know this for certain, but I'm surmising that the township is not legally required to provide that notice. The advertisement would be the legal notice that we would do for the public hearing before the Board of Supervisors was to take an action. Now, I get what the counter to that is. You want to make sure that the residents have that information, or at least have that notice. But I think that from the legal perspective, and I could be wrong, it would only have to be when we go to vote for our public meeting.
I think that's terrible personally. If
Yeah.
that's how we're going to treat our residents.
I want to ask a question about the document. So I hate to be a stickler, but I'm on your website. I'm on Article 4, Section 4.1. And it discusses the historical resources map and inventory dated October 8, 2003. And when I look at the document in front of me, it says April 12, 2021. So 6 weeks ago, a new resource map was filed. And does everybody that might have been added to that know and have input? Because it's not the same document on the web that I'm looking at.
No one was added. We took people off. We took sites off that had been demolished. This ordinance, can I step back and give you an overall history? You've been thrust into this thing in the middle of it, and it's unfair to you. I recognize that. But let me go through it. First, historic preservation. It's legal. There are lots of rights that property owners have. There are lots of rights that communities have. This is the intersection of the two. The Supreme Court ruled that historic preservation can be done in the 1970s. It's an old issue. It's done. The Pennsylvania Constitution recognizes that communities can adopt preservation measures. The MPC allows communities to adopt preservation measures. The Newtown Comprehensive Plan anticipates that preservation measures will be adopted. This preservation ordinance has it in its origin with the Pennsylvania Museum and Historic Commission. It's a template. This is standard vanilla historic preservation language. Historic preservation has some subjectivity to it. Everything does. You know, when the police decide you're driving too fast for conditions, when the inspector decides your weeds are too long, when someone decides who's going to play shortstop for the Little League, they're all subjective decisions. So it's correct that at the national level, they don't protect anything. We have 5 sites in Newtown that are on that are historically designated at the federal level. 5: Square Tavern, Octagonal School, Bartram Bridge, Paper Mill House, and Old St. David's Church. They have the highest level of recognition for preservation, and yet the owners of each of them can tear them down with just filing a demolition notice with you. There's no preservation. The only place where you can do preservation in the form of opposing demolition is at the township level through a preservation ordinance. That's what this does. That's the main thrust of this thing, to say, you know, we've been fortunate that we have so many great owners who have cared for their properties, and you know, we have that many, about 100 that exist today that have had a series of great owners. That's the best preservation. This doesn't interfere with that. It's primarily aimed at demolition.
So I thought we were told earlier it doesn't take any rights away, but it sounds like it does. Not that I'm not that I'm either objecting or supporting or whatever. I'm just reflecting.
Every law takes away rights. So it's a law, it takes away rights. So here's what we recognize that we want as a community, if we're saying we want these things preserved, that puts that burden on those landowners. And so our idea in doing this is, therefore, they should get additional rights. And so what the ordinance tries to do is say, if you have a historic resource, you can apply for additional uses beyond what is permitted by zoning and the existing law. It's the idea, sometimes people grow old in a house, it's a big empty house. If they could use it as an Airbnb or something like that, we're saying it should be permitted. That allows them to have income, allows them to stay in the place, and it doesn't have to be torn down for, you know, a big new Toll Brothers development. So we've tried to put what we can. There's only so much you can give them, you know. Would love to give them, would love to waive fees when they apply for things, or, you know, there's not really that many tax incentives that we can do at the township level. So the idea is we recognize that, and they are permitted additional uses. Most of them are just homeowners in single family homes, and they will never use that, and they will never ever have the historic commission in their life. I live in a historic home in Marple. It's been subject to a preservation ordinance, Marple's preservation ordinance, for 20 years. The burden is very, very light. I don't do anything. They don't do anything. The only time it will come into play is if I filed for demolition. And even in that case, the Historic Commission makes recommendations. It has hearings. It decides, do we want to oppose a demolition of the Square Tavern? And then it would send that recommendation to the full Board of Supervisors. They decide, not the tree huggers, not the history people. The elected officials decide. So the ultimate power is in their hands. And so that's the overview. It's trying to preserve these things because we're losing them.
Describe the process. So I'm looking, you say other uses, historic uses may be permitted as recommended by the Historical Commission. Does it, so just functionally, the process would be Historical Commission would review it. Then essentially, does it go to the Board of Zoning because it's now a use not permitted in zoning? Or does it go to planning because this commission is now going to play the role of zoning and have approval, have the right to approve it? How does that process work?
It goes to the supervisors. If you're an
So
owner,
it's planning and zoning.
my understanding, it's an overlay over zoning, but it's the commission is the recommending board. And
So they're
then
not approving, they're like us, like planning, we just recommend.
Exactly. Exactly. So
So,
you have a
Ah,
historic
question.
resource, you want to use it for an additional use, you want to use it for an Airbnb if that's, or an in-law suite or something that's not allowed, otherwise allowed. You file an application, you bring in your, and say, here's what I want to do. The historic commission says yay or nay. The idea is we're trying to, we're not trying to use this as a club to hit the homeowners over the head. I mean, my theory is we want to approve these things if it can be done. We had right across from Culbertson School, there's an old house that had a barn in the back, and the owner of it wanted to take the barn and put a new living unit in it. And it was a violation of zone. And so they asked for whatever they come before planning and do, and we stood up in favor of it because this is exactly what we want people to do. Because you can either tear it down or you can put money into it, make it into an economic use. That's, that would be wonderful. That we recommended it, but we have no ordinance.
Doug, much appreciated and well stated there in terms of what the intent of what you're trying to do is, right? Protect historical buildings. I don't think there's one person on this screen right now that doesn't want to protect historical buildings. I'm inclined to say maybe I don't fully understand the rush to move through this incredibly clearly, but I really don't understand all of the various layers of how this could or could not impact our township, the historical society, the residential homeowner. I know I go down the 2 houses down the street to my neighbor. He's going to be like, what the F are you talking about? About my rights are being changed. I knew nothing about it. So the reality is, Len, that is the reality. He is going to be upset.
We have a lot of owners in our.
I can't hear you, Len.
We have a lot of owners in our historical society who are historic resource owners. And so you keep arguing like maybe they didn't get noticed. Maybe there's
no. I'm saying aside from that, this should happen. This should get done. Right.
But there just needs to be adequate time.
The timing, I know.
I'm good.
That's the
fully supportive.
Let me ask that question just so I can understand, so I can just relay it back to the board. When you say rush and time, are you saying, explain that to me just so I can see if there's a happy medium that we can kind of come to, because the only time commitment that we have right now is the advertisement that we put out for the public hearing before the Board of Supervisors. And so I'm just trying to grasp what it is essentially that you're getting at, Mr. Evans and Ms. Fasora, with regards to the time comment.
I'm saying why do we, if you're asking me for, we're just reviewing it. We're not voting on it, right? But if you're asking for me to make a suggestion on this piece of legislation or document that came on Monday, we got redlined this afternoon. I'm just not there yet, to understand if I say yes, send it to the board and the planning commission said yes. I wish I could say yes. I don't know enough.
I think that's well stated, Paul. I don't think anybody, I'm not in a position to say yay or nay or good effort or poor effort. I mean, I think that
it's a good effort. It is a good effort. It's just
the specific content. I mean, so I just think it was stated earlier that this has been kind of on the to-do list for years and years and years. And I just don't have an appreciation for why this has to be heard in the time frame that was mentioned. What is the rush right now? Why can't we just take a little time and read it and understand it and That's all.
Yeah.
Where is the rush coming from? And if the township hasn't notified the property owners to give them adequate time to kind of go through it and have questions and all, it just seems it has a feel of being rushed. Not that it's a poor document. It just is there adequate time to look at it and let everybody absorb it and ask questions and maybe make changes before you get to the point of having a hearing about it.
Yeah, I think I mean, that's a good point. I mean, look, I will say that I hear the concern. I don't know if I agree with it, because in the normal process of regular ordinance adoption, where that involves a zoning change, this is how it would play out across municipalities in the entire Commonwealth. So, I hear that. As Mr. Evans said, or the Historical Society, I should say, is just looking for if you want to make recommendations, you can make recommendations as you do for anything else. I mean, I remember when I was on the Planning Commission, some items we would be able to get through fairly quickly. Others, like the sign ordinance, I know was at least a 6-7 month process. But this ordinance is not being rushed. It is just the normal, and again, I respect the feeling that some think that it is, but it's just following the normal procedure that any municipality in the Commonwealth would follow with regards to a hearing before a governing body.
I don't see how you can designate in an ordinance certain properties are historical resources by legislative fiat. I don't see how the supervisors can do that. And that's what this ordinance does. I mean, there's no process of determination. This ordinance in the very first paragraphs specifically states what is ground level number 1. I mean, there could be modifications after that, but this gives the Historical Society the ability to designate those particular properties. And I think as it's drafted, I don't think that that's an appropriate action by the Board of Supervisors. And if you're asking the Planning Commission for comments, I want my comments to be heard loud and clear. I might be wrong, but I seriously recommend that point of view be reviewed by both the solicitor of the township and by the Board of Supervisors, because what you're attempting to do in this legislation, the way it's structured, is frankly, I believe, completely improper. And if you're asking this Planning Commission and its members to say what they think of it, Mr. Altieri, I want you to know what I think of it as a Planning Commission member. I think it's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, and I think that the legislation as it's drafted goes too far. I think you just say to the Historical Society, with all due respect to them, and look I agree with Paul Evans that the Historical Society does serve a purpose, and everybody supports maintaining historical structures. But there's a balancing here, as Mr. Hume said, and every legislation takes the balancing. This legislation, as it's written, goes far too far.
The plain vanilla preservation ordinance. It's approved by the Pennsylvania Museum Commission. It's authorized by the MPC. The historic resources originally came from the Delaware County Planning Commission, who did a countywide survey of historic resources. And so the initial listing was done by planning professionals. The things they've missed, we've added. But it won't be the Historical Society. We won't be involved. It creates a historic commission. The township has control of that. If they don't like the people that are on it, they can switch those people. If the township wants to, if someone says I went off the list, there's a provision for that.
But doesn't it put 119 houses or 119 historical, what are they called? Historical resources. Doesn't it create the initial 119 historical resources as the Historical Society has decided? Isn't that exactly in the statute?
As the Delaware County Planning Commission.
No, as the Historical Society, the Newtown Square Historical Society. That's who is the society defined in the ordinance.
Right.
That's how it is. You determine who the 119 units are. Not the Board of Supervisors. You decided.
And on what basis? What are the criteria of determining what is a historical building and what is not? What is a resource or not? It doesn't matter if there are members and there are professional planners they are not important. It's eventually it's going to be in the law, and we want to know how this is determined and if there are grounds to argue against that determination.
Well, looking in the,
As this document is written up, is it subordinate to our subdivision and land development or in all aspects?
in what way?
So that, there's a lot of places where it talks about what's required, plans, things like that. Is there any scenario where a property owner doesn't have to go through the subdivision and land development process? Because it was hard to tell.
It doesn't deal in subdivision and land development.
Well, I do believe
Yes,
that deals
demolition.
with a major improvement of a commercial property, which would be a normal procedure. I do believe it references subdivision land development in one location.
I mean, I'm uncomfortable with the
Yeah,
process described. So there's a list of uses: cultural studio facility, educational conference center, public garden, house, museum, educational farm, home occupation. Other uses may be permitted. So those, I'm uncomfortable with what was described there. And then it goes on to factors to be considered.
What are you uncomfortable with?
And I'm on section 5.2.
But what are you uncomfortable with?
So factors to be considered: provide a site plan, use conform to applicable fire reg. Is this if they're going for an additional use as written under that last bullet point, or if they change from a public garden to a house museum, do they have to go through all these 10 items that they might have to deal with, hours, parking, sewer capacity? What would trigger them having to go through 5.2A in all its 10 categories?
A historic resource owner wants to use its property for something not allowed by the current zoning.
Zoning, or these 6 categories above in 5.2?
I'm giving you the context. There's an owner of a historic resource. She lives in a large house. She's not using 9 of the 10 bedrooms. She says, I want to use it for a rooming house, a B&B. I'm just trying to find a, so she would apply and ask for that use. This is one of the things that we're trying to give owners of these historic resources so that they aren't forced to tear the place down. Because she has the choice. She can stay in the house and get more income, or she can sell it to a developer who's going to knock it down and build 2 houses on her plot. So she comes and she asks if she can use it for this purpose. And so this list of things, we say, how much parking are you going to need? Are you going to have lights on at night? Is there going to be a lot of traffic? It gives it's going through the safety issues and the things that her neighbors might object to.
So how do the neighbors get notified? So in the scenario you're providing, it sounds like introducing commerce to a residential neighborhood, which may be appropriate in the example you provided.
You want to give,
but how do the neighbors find out?
They're all identified as conditional uses, which is a zoning process. It would require public notice, and just as a variance would, or a special exception.
Yeah.
Right. But that's, if you're going to give them additional uses, then that's what additional uses are, is things other than single family home. So.
But in your scenario, will she be able to sell the property to a developer and knock the building down or not?
What's that? Can you?
The scenario that you presented,
right.
She could use the 9 rooms for Airbnb or whatnot,
right?
Or sell the house to a developer who will knock it down and build something else. Does she still have the ability to do so?
She would file for demolition that would be referred to the Historic Commission. The Historic Commission would hear it out. They could recommend yes, let it go, or no. And then the supervisors make the ultimate
So-
decision.
She wouldn't file. I think what Shimon is asking is, would she be able to sell her property to someone else? That person then becomes the owner and would then go through
The demolition.
determination of whether they could
Yes,
demo.
But they're not going to buy the property if they know that this issue's out there.
That's the point.
Right.
Yep, good point.
And why can't that go through zoning now and planning? Why can't we indicate the township's motivation to be supportive of certain properties, and in order to maintain our historic resources within the township? If they got a variance from the zoning board, how would that be different?
This is the tool that the municipal planning code gives a township if it wants to adopt it. This is the tool. It's called a preservation ordinance. It's the term of art. It's the language of art. This is the tool, a township you can choose. It gives you this tool in your planning to be able to use it or not. Again, I live in Marple, several historic resources on the Delaware County Community College, and they applied for demolition. The Historical Commission in Marple recommended against. Marple supervisor said, thanks for your input, demolish. So, it only works when the supervisors have the will to enforce it. And I'm sure from contentious hearings that if 100 neighbors show up and are screaming at you, it's an easy call for you to say demolish. So that's how, same as all government, but this is the tool, and it gives you a legal basis to preserve things if you want them preserved.
Do you anticipate adding more
No.
structures to this based
If
on
an
the
owner-
definition?
If an owner wanted to add it, if an owner wants to, they could put it on, because at some point in the future, the state may, right now, there are not a lot of tax incentives for personal homes. There are some tax credits for businesses with historic resources, but not for people that own their homes. But some states do that. They give incentives for preservation at the state level and that taxes. So, but in order to get that incentive, you'd have to be designated as a historic resource in someone's scheme of things. So, if Pennsylvania ever comes there, then people might be knocking on the door to ask to be designated. We don't expect that to happen.
Well, that's actually a good idea if there would be a tax incentive. But,
Would love it.
It would be a good idea in order to get a change of use.
right,
I was more referring to the Historical Society deciding that something should be a historic resource.
yeah, so how did you decide? Is it an age threshold? What made you decide a particular property is historic or not?
There are 10 ways, 10 reasons that something would be historical, and it's listed in this document, 4.3B.
Okay.
Well, that's the answer, right? Is that what you're saying?
And almost anything could fit into those categories.
Almost anything.
I guess I missed that one.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, at some point, you have to put your faith in the decency of people and the knowledge they bring to it,
I don't think we can put our faith in the public decency in the context of being on the planning commission or board of supervisors when we have landowners, et cetera. I hear you, Doug. I wish it were that way.
But you're
We
gonna
do need to
point-
make sure that that the layers of the legal system the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed.
Right, but the Historic Society falls away if this is adopted. I mean, we don't fall away, we still function in our own sphere, but for purposes of this ordinance, then, it's taken over by the Historical Commission, which is appointed by the supervisors, that designates who the things are. So it's not like the if this thing's adopted, then the Historical Society goes back to being the Historical Society. And the Historic Commission that is appointed by same people that appoint you, you know, and why do they appoint you? Because you bring knowledge and experience to the planning task. And so we hope when they appoint people to the Historical Commission, they appoint people with interest, knowledge that they bring to their task, and that those people, and those are the people I'm saying, you know, at some point you have to put your trust in. It's you, it's them.
Yep.
You know, that's local government. That's a government.
Well, sorry, this is Reed. I've been quiet up to this point because I think everyone has been so vocal and have saying sort of what I agree with here. I just think that around the section that Anita brought up, it's very broad, and this, you know, you start off with 119 properties, you know, how many more are going to be brought down the line, you know, from going forward. And I also noticed the piece about eminent domain in there, and what is that really? Is that supposed to provide teeth to the township to take over properties that are not going to be cared for anymore?
Well, that's the libertarian point of view is, if you want to preserve this, then why don't you buy it? And so that piece would give the township that power. You could buy it, put a preservation easement on it, and then resell it. Is that going to happen? Probably not. But again, you want all the tools that you can have in the toolbox. That's my view, is you want all the tools in the toolbox, whether you're going to use them or not. That's up
I
to
think
people.
the challenge with that is you can't look at an ordinance in light of the people who are presently in office and the present circumstances. You have to look at an ordinance in light of who could be and what are there, you know, like, I think it has to navigate through people, not because of people.
You know what? Policemen can abuse things. Firemen can go out and start fires. Planning people can benefit their friends who are getting paid off. You know, everyone, you know, that's every situation. So
I think all we're saying is an opportunity to read through this with enough attention to those potential pitfalls. And I don't think I've heard tonight, don't take on this task. Because I think Paul said earlier is I think we all share the agreement that we want it would be a tragedy to have the historical buildings in our community demoed. I don't think anybody's in disagreement. The question is this the correct? Is all of this the right way? Are there adjustments that could be made? And I think a little bit of time is needed to facilitate just looking through that and kind of putting the puzzle together and saying, is there a weak spot in here that we want to attend to before it moves forward?
Yeah, you know,
Be able to consider
on
what
the
does this
timing
really mean? What does this really mean to people?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm looking at the Tredeffern Easttown draft, similar document. They say historic resources list, the list adopted by the Board of Supervisors from time to time as part of this article of the historic resources of the township. Would you replace your paragraph where you say compiled by the society to that language, just saying it's the Board of Supervisors list, which may change from time to time? I think there's some components like that would create comfort on our side, that if we're going to vote for it, something like that would be much more desirable than, you know, we're having the members that were voted in to make rules in the township, make the ultimate rule of who's on the list, who's not on the list.
And the reasoning behind what goes on the list.
Right, and then it could be, you know, but, you know, I think I'd be a lot more comfortable seeing that. You know, a lot of questions have been who's on, how do they get on, how do they get off? People aren't familiar with the Historical Society. You know, they may have gotten a letter, but if they're not really familiar, they might not have gone to your meetings. The neighbor might be highly interested, that the property next door might be, but if they didn't get a letter, they didn't go to the meeting. You know, I would want to see regular public meetings like we did for the comp plan. There's a lot of stakeholders You know, and I lived in a 100-year-old house before I moved into the one I live in now that has aluminum siding. You know, I know if someone buys a house like that, they buy and it's work. Every day there's, you know, you're maintaining it, you're taking care of it. You know, it's a contributing factor to the township. I just think it needed more sunshine and review than it appears to have got.
Mr. Chairman, I do want to mention that we have one attendee with his hand up. I don't know. I just want to
Let's go to
aware of
public
that.
comment.
I'm sorry.
Go to public comment.
You okay with that?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. John Ford, Equus Capital Partners. I'm not going to regurgitate a lot of the comments that were made here tonight, but I am in agreement with all the comments made here tonight. We have several properties that are affected by this ordinance. And I have to say, we're not against a preservation ordinance here in Newtown Township. Matter of fact, we were very supportive of one. But if the board, if the planning commission had an opportunity to go through what has been presented to you, you'll see, you know, a lot of, I think Mr. Humes and Mr. Altieri were simplifying it in a way that is incorrect. This ordinance has a number of regulated uses here. And Greg had pointed out, Greg Edelman in his review, there's a number of sections of this in conflict with your SALDO regulations and with the MPC. If you pass this ordinance today, I mean, it's appealable. I mean, it's fraught with a number of different issues in here. I think, and for us, we're not sure why this is being pushed through. We've spent millions and millions of dollars preserving the historic core of the Ellis campus, and this ordinance, as drafted today, has several impacts for us. You know, we routinely turn over tenants. We routinely make modifications to these buildings on the exterior. And there's cases where we need to get tenants in 30 days or 45 days. You know, if the township wants to pass an ordinance protecting historic properties, then I'm all for that. And we'll sign up today that, you know, we'll pledge we will never demo any of these properties on the Ellis campus. I just don't understand the rush to put forth an ordinance like this that is onerous not only on commercial property owners, but on residential property owners when they want to make any alterations to the properties or anything else. I mean, you really have to dig into the document on what a residential property owner has to do to get approval from this commission. And a lot of this is subjective. And I just, you know, I'm all in favor of an ordinance. So is Equus Capital Partners. You know, we're asking for time to work through the ordinance, an ordinance that makes sense for everybody in the township, that's inclusive. And, you know, whether it's through workshops or, you know, the whole process that this ordinance actually made its way here to the Planning Commission is a little bit of a head scratcher. I've been involved in townships where, you know, historic ordinances have been proposed, where the township hires a planner, where it goes through a public meeting process. And, you know, I mean, it takes a lot of time to get one of these ordinances passed. You're being asked to provide recommendation and forward to the Board of Supervisors for their vote at the next meeting, whenever that is. Half the world is on their way to the beach tonight. So I'm a little suspicious why this came to the board tonight, but that aside, I would ask the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors that we go through a process to which all the affected property owners have an opportunity to meet with board members, with the Planning Commission, with staff, and talk about all the provisions and all of the regulations that is being proposed in this ordinance. And again, we're not against it. We're in favor of an ordinance, and I'll be the first to support it, but it's got to be an ordinance that has to work for everybody. And that's my 2 cents, but I appreciate your time.
You know, John, thanks for your comments. I would say that take this the right way. Equus's point of view on the subject, although it's good to hear it, it does not sway, does not sway the Planning Commission's directive or our thoughts on what would be a good ordinance and should we recommend this or not. So I hear your points. They kind of echo some of the things that we were saying. You know, it goes beyond just Equus's point of view, though.
No, I understand that.
And John said
I
that. He said-
understand that, Paul.
Oh, yeah.
And just also know that when we bought the campus in 2004, all of the historic structures on the property were falling apart. We spent millions and millions of dollars putting those historic properties back in use and getting them back on the tax rolls. So I'm 100% with you. And sorry, Claire, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just saying, I felt that you have a point of view, and we are supposed to take into that, and every homeowner and any other property owner. I guess it was brought up earlier, I think, Leonard, by you, is that we remember the sign ordinance. And I think this circles back to everything everybody's been saying. We saw that ordinance time and again. We picked it apart. We got it to where we felt it was fair and reasonable, you know, compromising here and there to try to get to a place where we thought it was the right ordinance. And I don't see that happening here at all. We had lots of public participation. We had lots of viewpoints shared with us. We as a planning commission saw it multiple times, finally got it, you know, put into a place where I think that everybody could get comfortable around it. And I don't see that process taking place here. And it's something that has not only impact on the property owner, the direct recipient of this ordinance, in hopefully good ways, but there also may be challenging ways, but it also influences those around that property. And I just feel that I can't believe this is being pushed through in a way dissimilar to other ordinances that we've had to deal with. I just don't understand the difference, why there's a different tact on this particular ordinance versus our other ordinances.
I understand. Yep.
Can I say something, Mr. Chairman? I mean, I'm not gonna,
Yep.
My signing in here tonight was because I was getting frantic text messages from various members that there was no one on here to answer any of these questions. And so from a supervisor's perspective, I'm telling you the history of where we were, where we are today, and what the ultimate goal is. And the Historical Society by Mr. Humes and Ms. Cavalier, I think, have done a good job of explaining the intricacies of the more detail of the process that they went through. So just to make sure that that's clear, and I guess I kind of preface that because I don't want to hijack your meeting. This is the Planning Commission, but again, just to give that sort of background. In terms of the questions or the comments that the ordinance is appealable or there are legal issues with the ordinance, leave that to the lawyers. We have the solicitor that can review the red lines that were provided by Equus. Equus was given months of notice before the Board of Supervisors even voted on it. And just like they did today.
Well, hold on. We were giving notice by the Historical Society, not the township. Okay, let's make that clear, Leonard.
Just like today, they were given notice.
So we didn't know that this was even coming on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, can I have the floor? I believe I was recognized.
Yeah, John.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. And just like they were provided notice before it came to the Board of Supervisors, as they're doing here, they decide to drop the red line a few hours ahead of time. That's fine. Everybody's busy, and we get that. But I just want to make sure that that's clear, that just like any other property owner that was affected, that received the notice, and BPG obviously acknowledged that they received the notice, because then they had the conversation with our solicitor. And there was some language that we were able to remove and move around before the supervisors took their vote. And then we received the additional red line today. So there might be some legal things. Some of that inside that, the red line that was provided by Mr. Edelman is, I would say, as a lawyer, legitimate. And I think that Mr. Catania needs to iron that out, or Mr. Sikora with Mr. Edelman. But let the legal issues remain with the solicitors, and keeping the purview of the Planning Commission in the recommending aspect of it for the rest of the rest of the ordinance. And then I just need to address this as well, as if there is some sort of, I guess, two parts, that there is something nefarious with the time frame here. This is a public meeting that was scheduled, as all public meetings are. It had nothing to do with people going down the shore, or whatever the accusation or insinuation was on that. It would be no different. It's just the way that the schedule followed, the schedule fell, and the way that the ordinance was put on the agenda. I mean, we could punch holes through any sort of scheduling. Oh, we can't do it in July, everyone's away. You can't do it in November, it's too close to Thanksgiving. You can't do it towards February, everyone's celebrating Valentine's Day. I mean, there's always going to be an excuse for that. But that's just the simple fact, is that based off of the Board of Supervisors taking their public vote and then placing it on the Planning Commission agenda. And the last thing is, this is not being, and I respect, again, the feeling of this, but this is not being rushed from a supervisor's perspective. We are just following the ordinance, or excuse me, the normal ordinance adoption procedure that we have for anything else, whether it was the Shade Tree Commission, where we did that, or any other ordinance within the township. So I, again, don't want to hijack this meeting, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to again present, what it is on the supervisor's perspective. Was not intending to be here to defend this, but just to provide that insight.
And the background's helpful. Thank you, Leonard.
Mr. Chairman.
Can I just clarify a couple
No,
things?
John, may
No. I need to clarify a couple things. Number one, we were provided the wrong copy of the ordinance. And the day of the supervisors meeting that afternoon, we were provided the correct copy of the ordinance by Mr. Humes. Okay, that's number one. We never had the correct copy of the ordinance. So Kurt, this is political. It's not practical.
It's not political. It's not political at all. This is Tina Roberts. I'm the liaison to the Planning Commission, and it's not political, John. And there was no rushing it to also echo what Leonard had said. We just adopted a tree ordinance on a list of trees. We went through the process. We did the same thing with the Historic Commission. Hearing what everyone is saying, I would imagine now we will regroup and figure out a way to make it more open, because it sounds as though everyone is a little upset, or they feel like they're being pushed. You've got two supervisors on this call today. We're not pushing anything. We had the Historic Commission put this together, and as Leonard said, if there are legal issues, we'll let the solicitor go through it again with either Joe or Rich or Mr. Edelman, whatever. There was nothing nefarious. There is no pushing of any ordinances whatsoever. And I take offense to the fact that, John, you said that this is politically motivated. In no way is that the case at all.
Well, where is Rich or Joe? Why are they not on this call?
Do they ever come on to a Planning Commission call?
No, I'm just saying, like, something like this is, we're kind of in,
Because this is, again,
unfortunate, hold on a sec, Len, hold on a sec. Unfortunately, the legal aspects of this document and how it's worded do affect the planning.
Well, the sign, they weren't on with the sign ordinance. So we can ask the solicitor why he wasn't on the call. How's that?
They do come from certain, I can't now in history recall, but there are times that are not hearings when they are present. I couldn't honestly share with you what that is.
absolutely not.
Well,
I think all we
it's
want
a
to do is just
meeting,
have a
there's
little time to
difference.
roll through this. I mean, I think we're
That's
making
fine.
a
That's fine.
maelstrom
I
out
think
of nothing.
everyone's getting a little too personal with this at this point.
I
We're
can't
not
help you
adopting
get personal.
anything. We're not.
We have a
Excuse me,
lot.
John. Excuse me, John. I am speaking.
So
I'm speaking.
it is personal.
I am
because
speaking.
I
I'm speaking.
understand that you made.
You made an accusation. There is nothing being rushed through this. We're not voting on this next week. And Planning Commission meets once a month. It happens to be the Thursday before Memorial Day. There is nothing nefarious about it. So we will, I'm sure that the solicitor, Mr. Catania, will regroup and we will figure out how we're going to move forward with this. Okay? And we'll take they'll work out the legal aspect of this. I mean,
Mr. Chairman, I did unfortunately mute Mr. Ford, so if you let me know when it's okay to put him back.
I'm finished. So I just wanted to,
if I may.
I just wanted to reiterate what Leonard had said.
Yeah, I think that maybe, we need to come down a little bit. There is no argument here. So following actually Mr. Altieri's comment, perhaps the best would be from the legal aspect of this is that the attorneys will go through that and rewrite those items that are questionable, that are arguable. So what comes in front of us the next time is something that at least will protect the township. We don't want the township to be sued about every paragraph in this new ordinance. So what do you think, Len, about going through that, through the legal aspect?
Whatever the planning commission, whatever the desire of the planning commission is the desire of the planning commission. And if that's the wish of them, then, we will, as Supervisor Robert Sykap said, reconvene and circle back the wagons. Yeah.
I mean, my sense is that we're not going to get a motion tonight. I'm not, so rather than, I think we've all expressed different thoughts on, some of them very similar, some different, but there doesn't seem any, movement to make a motion. There's been a lot of feedback, so maybe, we can take a look again next month, at a document that seems to, we've had a process ourselves for this kind of document. And so as we look at this, that's the lens we look through. The signed ordinance, as Claire mentioned, was extensively public, extensively worked through. So we were fair and, when we look at this and we're going to make a comment, I guess we're looking to have that same feeling. It's not in our control, but we still want to get that warm and fuzzy that it's been worked through and the stakeholders that want to, have input have had so. Any other comments?
Kurt, can I make a suggestion?
Yep.
I can't even.
Technology 2021, everyone.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Oh,
Now we lost her.
let's give her a minute. So I'm sure she'll click back in.
Well, I will say as an aside, it's great being back to the Planning Commission. I've missed all of you and I haven't seen so many of you in a long time.
You're welcome to visit.
I was jumping on for what I thought was going to be a 5-minute conversation. So my dinner is now cold and probably in the trash. So if anybody has an extra couch, I'm sure I'll need to
Have you talked about going live again at some point?
We are actually going to be going live in June. Is the governor's emergency declaration is expiring at the end of the month. And so we will be going live then.
Will planning commission too?
I believe the entire township is.
All right.
Good.
Are you all going to miss that? 'Cause it's
I'm looking to get out of my house more. Remember, I've got 4 young ones, you know.
This can't beat the convenience of it.
So Supervisor Roberts Lakeup just called me, so I'm going to allow her to, if everybody can everybody hear this? Go ahead, Tina.
I was just going to suggest that if the planning commission can note other things that are other than legal, any comments that they have on the ordinance as it is now, or we can go back to Mr. Catania and have it reworked. And we'll come up, of course, Supervisor Altieri, if there's a way that we can open this up maybe to the public more, because it sounds as though the commission would like to have more public input on this. Maybe we can put something together for the next planning commission meeting with regard to how we would advertise this ordinance.
Everybody's nodding their head in agreement, so.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm at the high school at a band concert, so I apologize.
No problem.
Well, thank you for joining.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
It shows your dedication,
Thanks,
Tina.
guys. I'm going to hang up now. Have a happy Memorial Day weekend, and we'll circle back on this one.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Bye, Tina.
And I will, if you don't need me, Mr. Chairman, I will jump off as well. And Mr. Rezchek, I think you have the marching orders on how we'll probably be proceeding from this on a township perspective.
Yes, I do.
Sounds good.
Thank you again, everyone. I really do appreciate it. And, I'm going to nerd out real quick, but this is local government in action, so I appreciate it. And I look forward to a good product from everyone at the end.
Thanks, Leonard.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Bye.
We do still have 2 attendees. I don't know if anyone else has any additional comment. If you do.
Are there any public comments? So do you want to walk through the document? It's kind of briefly and just see if we can give some guidance beyond the general, or what do you think what's the desire here?
Kurt, I think if there's going to be modifications to the document or to the ordinance, I think deferring reviewing the present draft, if it's going to be modified, makes a lot of sense. I don't think we should spend a lot of time if there's going to be modifications.
And give us all a chance to look at it some more.
Yeah, I can tell you what I heard.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I just wanted, taking the temperature, do people want to kind of walk through it? And
I have one comment though about the markups by Greg Edelman. One actually, unless I misunderstood that one, that there is a requirement written to list all the historic structures on a property, and he marked that, he circled that. I don't have it in front of me right now, as if he objects to that. And I think a property that contains such structures should be listed. I don't think that a property owner should avoid listing all the historic properties on his historic buildings on his property. That's all.
Okay.
yeah, I mean, ultimately, I guess the supervisors have to approve the list, but certainly the preliminary list. I think the supervisors want to start with a good list, and and make their decisions from there.
Right.
I think one thing that we're concerned about, and again, I'm going to use being a listener board member and the potential conflict of interest there. But to what Paul's point was, there's one house listed on there as a historic house, and it's gone. So I'm wondering how recent this list has been put together and whether anyone has gone back and checked all the various pieces to it.
I can answer that. We went through this process 20 years ago for a preservation ordinance. It went through 18 drafts, went to planning, Delaware County planning. It went over a course of a long time. So that was the list. And then it was taken to a vote in an election year. It was bad timing, and it was tabled. And that's where it's been since 2003, tabled. So then this came up again. So we started updating the list. The one that is on the spreadsheet is the most up to date. The map, Kathy Spar had done that for us, and we were trying to get her to update that before she left. We just ran out of time. You know, the real heart of the thing is the spreadsheet that shows the detailed listing of each site, its address, its tax number, what kind of resource it is. We went through that. We lost, I think, around 10 structures since 2003, historic structures. So we have updated that. The things that the township had asked Lister to save, almost all of those were knocked down because they can. So there's not, so if there's still something that we missed, we went item by item. Kathy went out and visited them for the most part. And so it's the spreadsheet that is the most up-to-date thing. And
Douglas, just so you know, our board that is in place now are not the people who made those decisions. We've inherited what's there.
Yep. No, the toll largely took them down.
And I think some of those were gone before they took them over.
Yeah, like the one Lewis, the old farmhouse. It was great when they took us through. They say, "Yeah, we're going to make this the post office for the community." We thought this is great. You know, taking an old building and filling it with new wine. And then we get the phone call saying, "Oh, it's gone. We decided it wasn't structurally sound after 250 years." So I know that, and that's and they're within their rights because we don't have a preservation ordinance, and so you can knock down what you own. So that's part of the problem. And we're not, you know, we're largely not concerned with the people that love. Most of the times, people buy an old place because they love an old place. That's why I'm in mine. You know, when I go to my front door, I said someone walked out of that front door and picked up the newspaper and found that Abraham Lincoln had been elected president. You know, it has its own life to it. So that's the best preservation, to have owners who feel that way about their house. John Ford and BPG, they have been good. They own the Square Tavern. They've been wonderful custodians of that. They have put the money into it, you know, because we've always been concerned that, you know, you own a place like that and every 20 years it needs a roof and it needs to be heated and insured. And so, you know, we've had a good relationship with BPG. And so, you know, again, it's the ones that have been knocked down now. There's one is called demolition by neglect, where you say, you know, I know the township's going to give me a hard time here, but I'll just let the roof go for the next 10 years. And then the water will do what I'm not allowed to do legally. So this ordinance also takes on demolition by neglect. If the township has the will to say, we want you to put a new roof on, that's pretty drastic power, you know, but otherwise they win by going through the back door what they can't do through the front door. So that's another aspect of that. The property rights people say, well, that's not right. Man's home in his castle, and if he wants to let it fall down, he can. You know, that's the extreme view here. Again, this is the clash between the you know, property rights and community rights.
I hate to interrupt, but you know, I think we've done everything we can do tonight on this. And you know, I guess we'll look to regroup on this project at a later point when there's been some more review and we can get a little more clarity. Any members have any other issues they want to bring up?
Is it
No other
important
issues. I
to
would just
note,
ask, oh, go ahead,
ahead.
Paul.
is it important to note that the planning commission, as a result of this subject matter, are making no motion in any direction other than to continue to look to evaluate? Or do we say nothing?
I guess we should make a motion to wait for further review.
Yeah, I think, why don't we
really
defer consideration?
Right. I mean, we're not really.
I
Defer
like that.
consideration to a future date.
Smart.
Want to make that motion?
I'll move that the planning commission table consideration of the proposed ordinance to a further date to permit sufficient review of the ordinance by the appropriate personnel to be identified by the township, including its solicitor.
We have a second?
And public review.
And public review.
And
yes.
public review.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so we can just reflect that motion to the supervisors next week.
Yep.
And do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
A second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks,
Have a great
John.
holiday weekend, everyone.
Kind of a rough
Enjoy
night,
it.
but thanks for your time.
Everybody go to the beach, as you said.
It's going to be 50 and rainy.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
I'll see you at Casey's. Paul, I'll see you at Casey's.
See you there, Paul.
all right.
Take care, everyone.
Good night.
Take care.
Bye.